Hey, welcome everyone who's come to this webinar this morning in Australian time. My name is Annette Brownlee. I'm the chairperson of the Australian-based Independent and Peaceful Australia Network and one of the founding members of the Pacific Peace Network, who, along with World Beyond War and the International Peace Bureau, bring us all together today to hear voices from across the Pacific, remembering wars and of the past and working for peace today. So I would like to acknowledge all the Indigenous people from across the lands on which we meet here today. I come to you from the lands of the Turrbal and Jagera people in Brisbane, Australia, who lived in this place for many thousands of years and whose lands were stolen, firstly by the British imperialists and continued by the United States of America's imperialists to this day. The PPN is a network of activists and NGOs aiming to build a strong, united voice across the Pacific work together for a peaceful, nuclear-free, and genuinely secure future for Pacific peoples. That includes security of our environment. We oppose the militarisation that's underway and in particular work to prevent a future major powers war in our region, to which the AUKUS Pact is contributing to. Briefly, for any that don't know, which will probably be very few people here, AUKUS is a trilateral military agreement between Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. First announced in September 2011, 2021, the pact is primarily focused on military cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region, with a key component being Australia's acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines, leveraging technology provided by the United States and the United Kingdom, and further consolidation around high-tech military capability is being extended to other countries in the region through Pillar 2 of AUKUS. That includes Aotearoa and Japan and South Korea. Today, we will hear snapshot reports from 9 speakers across the Pacific. This overview of the lived experience of in different states and countries will then be followed by a Q&A and discussion using the raised hand on your screen. Liz Ramaswamy, Aotearoa World Beyond War Director and another founding member of the PPN, will facilitate this session, and we aim to finish in 90 minutes. So again, thank you all for coming, and to the speakers in particular. Our first speaker today is Sung-Hee Choi. Sung-Hee is a South Korean peace activist from Jeju Island, and she will discuss the long-standing United States military policies in South Korea since 1945, which brought division and laid the conditions for the Korean War. Welcome, Sung-Hee.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I am Sung-Hee Choi, who live in Gangjong Village, Jeju, and work for the demilitarization of Jeju Island. Let me share some slides. Okay. Today, I briefly share my talk under the title, The U.S. Force Projection in South Korea, Division and Permanent War System. First, South Korea's geopolitical position should be considered. Right after the liberation from the Japanese imperialism in 1945, Korea was divided by the United States, which caused the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. 3 years war was paused with the ceasefire in 1953, and Korea is technically still at the war. And under the Mutual Defense Treaty in 1954, The United States can use South Korean military and facilities anytime she wants. And as you can see from the map, South Korea has a high possibility that the entire country could be a US outpost against China. It is very important to pay attention to the UN command located in Pyeongtaek, the largest US overseas military base. The UN command was created by the US military during the Korean War. It was supposed to be dismantled with the end of the Korean War. However, the United States has never dismantled the UNC with the pretext that it manages the Korean ceasefire. The UNC has its rear command and 7 bases in Japan. The United States has revitalized the UNC and is using it to build the Asian version NATO. As you see, the nations in red letters are members of the NATO. Germany joined this year too. It also includes 3 AUKUS countries. Japan could be a member also, which is very sensitive to Koreans given the Japanese colonial history. On July 10, 2024, NATO stated in its declaration that it would strengthen cooperation in the defense industry, in the war industry with its partners, including 4 Indo-Pacific countries such as Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. The NATO Industrial Capacity Expansion Pledge contained strengthening the defense industry across NATO, strengthening cooperation with Ukraine, and strengthening cooperation with NATO partner countries. In late June this year, the Freedom Edge, South Korea, US, Japan first multi-domain exercise, including space and cyber, took place in the southern open waters of Jeju, followed by the second Freedom Edge held this month. According to a senior fellow in the Land Corporation, the World Freedom Edge suggests the Japanese linked to the war scenario in which the United States and South Korea are preparing. In July, a memorandum of understanding was signed for a trilateral security cooperation framework. It was actually the launch of the Korea-US-Japan military alliance. Its scope of application is the Korean Peninsula, the Indo-Pacific region, and beyond, which includes the South China Sea. I quote General Chance Saltzman, Space Force Chief of Space Operations, who said in May 2024, the US military cannot go it alone. Collaboration with the commercial partners and allies is essential. In the 2024 navigation plan, which was announced by the United States Chief of Naval Staff Lisa Franchetti this September, Franchetti says the United States moving toward 2 strategic goals by 2027 to prepare for the possibility of war with China and strengthening the long-term superiority of the Navy. According to her, the battle against Yemen in the Red Sea and the war in Ukraine were running for the future marine wars. Meanwhile, US Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell said it was Navy time. Repairing US naval vessels at shipyards in Korea, Japan, and other US allies, such as Australia, began this year. Korea's war industries, including Hanwha and Hyundai, have been hit with good news. The United States lies on a massive debt load of about 35 trillion won. That is why the United States is calling on countries in the Pacific Ocean to prepare for war and transform their industries into war industries. For South Korea, whose war power is already fifth in the world, overcoming division and achieving disarmament are important more than ever. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sung-Hee. That was really informative, and I'm sure the other speakers will pick up on much of what you're talking about. It certainly has relevance for us in Australia. I see our Defence Minister, Richard Marles, in one of those photos. So thank you again. Now we move to our next speaker, which is Mizuki Nakamura. And Mizuki is an anti-militarism activist, translator, and visual artist based in Tokyo. She is a member of One Love Take, a collective that works with the Residents Society for a helipad-free take in opposing militarization in the pristine Yanbaru Forest, northern Okinawa, and building international solidarity. Thank you, Mizuki.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I also would like to show some slides, so let me screen share. Okay. So today, my talk will be focusing on the area called the Nansei Islands. I would like to talk very briefly about the ongoing massive military buildup, the buildup of the Japanese military, or what they call the self-defense forces, what we call self-defense forces, and also the SDF's integration with the US military. And these are very visible right now, especially in the area called the Nansei Islands. And this is the map of the Nansei Islands. And as you can see, it's a chain of the islands that stretches between Taiwan and Kyushu region of Japan. So it includes Okinawa and part of the Kyushu region. So it's very, very close to Taiwan and China. And the Japanese government right now is building many ground self-defense force bases on many islands in this area. And the first one was built on Yonaguni Island in 2016, which is the closest island to Taiwan, only 110 kilometers away from Taiwan. And another one was built on Miyako Island in 2019. And another one was built on Amami Island in the same year of 2019. Then on Ishigaki Island in 2023. And now they are building another one on Mage Island. So there are about five islands. I mean, the bases that were built on those islands in Nansei. And of course, as you know, that these are taking place at the same time as the construction of a new US base in Henoko on Okinawa Island. And one of the Nansei Islands is called Yonaguni Island, which is the closest to Taiwan. And it's a very small island with about 1,500 residents. However, with the opening of the SDF base in 2016, about 200 SDF personnel and their family members moved into the island. Also, I want to say that the base that was built in 2016 was for the Self-Defense Forces Coast Guard, which was built on this pink part at the edge of the island of Yonaguni Island on this aerial map. But now the Japanese government is planning to build another facility for an SDF missile unit, which will be built on the yellow part. And also they are trying to build a large military port, which will be on the red part. So the military buildup continues on such a tiny island. Also, these new US bases, SDF bases in the Nansei Islands are now frequently used for joint military exercises with the US and also other countries. And the latest one just took place from October 23rd to November 1st. It was a biannual training called Keen Sword. And this year it was the largest training with about 45,000 US and Japanese military personnel joining. And also Australia and Canada joined them this year, as well as so many other countries as observers. And they were using not only US and SDF bases, but also commercial airports and seaports and other facilities, the commercial facilities on different islands in this area. So they were really exposing to local residents on those islands. And these were pictures in Ishigaki Island taken during the King Sword exercises. And the left picture shows residents protesting against King Sword in front of the SDF Ishigaki base. And the right one shows the training at the commercial Ishigaki airport. And these pictures were taken on Yonaguni Island, the closest island to Taiwan. And the left one shows this is an Osprey aircraft of self-defense forces flying over Yonaguni Island. And the right one was actually taken after this Osprey tilted unexpectedly and caused accident on such a tiny island. It actually hit ground and while trying to take off. So that was very dangerous. So the number of such joint military exercises with the US has drastically increased in the past years in Okinawa and all over Japan, as the SDF is integrated more and more into US military operations. Also, the number of countries that are coming to Okinawa and Japan to join such exercises is increasing right now as well. And we believe that such militarization will further intensify under our new Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba, which is a very dangerous super military, pro-military politician. And right now he is calling for the introduction of NATO framework in Asia. He also even suggested deploying SDF troops to Guam and Tinian. So it's just a brief overview of the massive militarization taking place in the Nansei Islands. And before I finish, I would like to say that this military buildup in Okinawa and other areas in Asia Pacific is deeply connected to our colonial responsibility, Japan's colonial responsibility, and the war that we waged in the past. So as a Japanese activist, I believe that we have to recognize our responsibility and continue our fight. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you for your amazing overview, really, of what is a very intense and cooperative build-up of military forces. And again, Australia's involvement in the intensification of these small islands. It's so important that we all know what's going on in different parts of our country. And in fact, the Osprey, with its terrible record, we did in fact have a crash of one of those on Indigenous land in Australia just recently. So thank you very much, Mizuki. Okay, our next speaker is Myra. Myra from the Philippines. Thank you, Myra, for coming. She is part of the Youth for Nationalism and Democracy, this Filipino political youth organization, and she values empathy, justice, and collective freedom. She strives to help create a more humane world where all children are allowed to laugh and play, where the youth are supported and inspired to pursue their dreams, and where the women, the elderly, and the common people are empowered and able to develop their full potentials. That is really so to the heart of what we're all working on, I think, and I can't help but think about the people in Palestine as I read those words out. Thank you, Myra. Over to you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. We are very much thankful for this opportunity to learn from and share, engage with all of you. Hi, everyone. So let me share just a few um, slides for. So yes. So, on behalf of Youth for Nationalism and Democracy, we would like to share our statement on the recent militarization activities in the Philippines. And our calls and analysis goes with all other countries in the Indo-Pacific. So the Philippine government has strongly supported AUKUS since its inception in 2021 by claiming that AUKUS will ensure peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. However, we say that AUKUS, along with other multilateral agreements entered by the United States in the region in an attempt to contain China, poses more threat than security. The Philippines, as a neo colony of the United States, now has an enhanced role for U.S. wars and war provocation. It is undeniable and alarming that the United States is edging again to launch war in the Indo Pacific region with China as its principal target. The United States, its closest NATO allies, Japan and Australia, are readying the Philippines and Taiwan to be provocateur starters for their war against China. U.S. arms sales and support, especially to Taiwan, have been steadily increasing, and also to the Philippines for the modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines. Despite the rejection by the Senate and the Filipino people of the new military base treaty with the United States in 1991, its military bases and presence of its troops and war materials are increasing through the Enhanced Defense Cooperation or Agreement or EDCA and the Visiting Forces Agreement between the United States and its neo colony, the Philippines. There is also Australia-Philippine Agreement, and very recently a Reciprocal Access Agreement or RAA was signed with Japan. In response, China lambasted the Philippines, claiming that by inviting external forces, the Philippines is sabotaging the efforts of China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to maintain peace and stability in the region. There are now 9 U.S. military bases within Philippine camps. It's called EDCA sites or agreed locations, aside from Subic Naval Base and Clark Air Base, which still function as U.S. bases. Last April 2024, the United States Army deployed one of its mid-range or intermediate range missile launchers in Ilocos Norte. The launchers are designed to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles, which is with a maximum range of 1,000 miles. These can hit targets inside southern China and in the Taiwan Strait. The location of the mid range missile launchers is not categorized as an EDCA site. War exercises with the Philippines with military forces of the US, Philippines, Australia, and Japan as regular participants and joint naval patrols in the West Philippine Sea by the ships of US, Philippines, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand are increasing in frequency. Ships from Canada and France have joined patrols. Already being readied are visiting forces agreement type with NATO countries, France, UK, Canada, and Germany. Uh, since the colonization of US in 1899, the Philippines has served as a launching pad for US wars. In 1899, US Marines from the Philippines invaded China for the first armed adventures of the US in the country, then shared by European imperial powers. The Philippines was also the base for the US war in Korea in 1950 to 1953 and for the United States long war in Vietnam and Indochina from 1954 to 1975. Presently, security forces are in constant skirmishes with China's Coast Guard, maritime militias, and navy in the West Philippine Sea, which is claimed by China as under its sovereignty. This will surely escalate because just over a week ago, the United States would confirm that indeed American troops are supporting Philippine operations in the South China Sea. through the U.S. Task Force Ayungin. In addition, just this November 18, the Philippines has signed a military intelligence sharing agreement with the United States that, according to our uh, Department of National Defense, is a critical step for it will deepen interoperability between two countries. Now, our organization, YND, calls for just like all that are in the Zoom, we call for the escalation and demilitarization of the Indo-Pacific region. We are in solidarity with all peace-loving advocates in fighting against U.S. wars. We resist the United States scheme of using the Philippines as a pawn and starter or provocateur for the war in China. We call on the Filipinos to oppose the subservience of the current Marcos regime to the United States and unrestrained intervention of U.S. and its building military bases here at the great cost of the Filipino people. We also condemn China for its unreasonable and unjust claim over the 90% South China Sea, uh, including the West Philippine Sea, and its continued harassment of civilians, security forces in the Philippines, and the banning of the Filipino fishers in the West Philippine Sea. Finally, we demand the government to genuinely uphold the principles of independence, non-alignment, promotion of peace, and rejecting war in international relations. Together with the people of ASEAN countries, we denounce and press China to withdraw its claim over the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea. We, the youth, commit to advance the international movement to declare um, South China Sea as the common sea for the benefit of the peoples of ASEAN, China, and Taiwan. Together, we resist U.S. interference in the region, and through our creativity, vibrancy, shared humanity, the youth join the global movement against wars being waged by the United States and its allies. We say fight imperialism and stop the war. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Another amazing contribution to this dialogue that's going on this morning. And again, when you mentioned the joint intelligence sharing, I immediately thought about what Australia is contributing to that with the long use of Pine Gap in Australia to both monitor and engage with US allies around the world. So big thank you, Myra. That really makes me think we need a really huge coalition of young people around the world. You've given a wonderful contribution here. Thank you. Our next speaker is Henk Flores. Henk is no stranger to these meetings and, in fact, one of the founding members of the Pacific Peace Network as well. Always wonderful to have Henk join us at these webinars. Henk describes herself in her introduction as a queer Chamorro activist, artist, and daughter of Guåhan. She is a member of several community organisations that focus on Chamorro self-determination, environmental justice, and the protection of sacred sites. Thank you very much, Henk. Over to you.
Thank you, Annette and Liz and all the organizers for today. And really want to thank the previous speakers from Jeju, Japan, and the Philippines. We are really so connected in confronting the increase of the military-industrial complex in our region and confronting that in real time on a regular basis as we're seeing the impacts to our environments, our communities, to the health and safety and the future of our homeland. So it's really an honor to be here with you all today and stand in solidarity with all of you against war making, against this beast, this Leviathan that does not care about anything we hold sacred, only cares about profit and exploitation. And really to think about how all of our struggles, all of the atrocities we're experiencing, while they're all connected here in the Pacific, they're also connected to what's happening in Palestine right now. the destruction and devastation of our lands and people happening here for military expansion are directly connected to the genocide happening in Palestine. So it's truly an honor to be here with you all. I'm going to go ahead and share just a few slides as well. Let's see. Let's start here. So can everybody can see that, right? Here we go. So yes, Guam is part of the second island chain here. Guåhan, the Northern Marianas, and other parts of Micronesia, actually, which aren't identified on this map, including Palau. We're all experiencing a massive military infrastructure increase. Of course, the first island chain includes Korea, Japan, Okinawa, of course, Taiwan, and the Philippines. This is the United States lineup of force projection in the Pacific, should they enter into a conflict with China or North Korea. And so we would be the first hit. We are known as first strike communities should the conflict escalate. And what's interesting to note is that while Guam is experiencing a massive military increase with the relocation of Marines from Okinawa to Guam, we're also seeing a lot of infrastructure in Saipan and the Northern Marianas. There is right now a divert airfield being built in the Northern Marianas in Tinian. This is the site where the nuclear bombs that landed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, murdering many people and contaminating that land permanently, really. Those came from Tinian, and that airfield, that very same airfield, is now being expanded. It's called a divert airfield because it's the backup airfield. Should Guam be devastated in war, this is the first place where the United States is going to transition a lot of military personnel and resources directly to Tinian. And also Palau right now has 4 massive military projects. All of these projects are in violation of our rights as Indigenous people to free, prior, and informed consent, violations of international law to protect that. But also in this case of Palau, they're violating their country laws to protect their environment. Right now, Palau is actually engaged in a lawsuit with attorney Julian Elgin, who's from Guam, who's Chamorro. The Ibil Society there has entered into a lawsuit to try to stop the destruction that these U.S. military projects are causing in Palau. And we're very proud also to say that we've collaborated with Blue Ocean Law as well. They've on our behalf submitted a testimony to the United Nations Special Rapporteurs on human rights and the environment, also for the same violations of free, prior, and informed consent. And then, of course, as you can see here, the third island chain includes Aotearoa, to Hawaii, and Australia is right there, between all the island chains. Just a few days ago, the U.S. brought to Guam a Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarine. This is the first time we've had a war-fighting submarine, an attack submarine of this nature, stationed in Guam, although there are 73 throughout the Pacific. This really reflects the buildup in Guam. And actually, there was even an article in the War Zone which mentions that we may see also in Guam Canberra-class submarines as well, as part of the AUKUS strategy, that this development of having the presence of this Virginia submarine could play a role in the trilateral agreement of AUKUS. And I'll go ahead and share the link to one of the articles. There are several articles actually about that, but I'll share a link to this one specific article that has I'll do that as soon as I'm done showing my slides. But in any case, in addition to the increase of submarines, we're looking at the establishment of the missile defense system here in Guam. And the military is going to establish what they're calling a 360 missile defense system in 16 sites from the north to the south of the island. This, they claim that a lot of it is only going to be on military occupied land. However, several acres extend into the ocean and into private areas outside of the military occupied areas. This proposal is going to really exacerbate environmental challenges right now. They've identified already several hazardous wastes that need to be removed at all sites, including lead contamination, pesticide contamination. And of course, this sort of establishment of the missile defense system makes us a bigger target of war. And as Leland Bettis, an expert with the Pacific Center for Island Security, just mentioned in our local paper just today, you know, whether it's 16, 19, 23, or 50 sites in the missile defense system, none of those is going to be enough to manage any kind of attack that Guam could endure from other countries, China or North Korea. And so while they're destroying these sites to build up this so-called missile defense system, it's not really going to keep us safe. And in the meantime, there's absolutely no money or effort going into building civilian bomb shelters or evacuation plans. We had war. We were attacked, of course, and occupied by Japan for over 3 years during World War II. We were attacked on the same day as Pearl Harbor. But then, of course, the United States had a very violent recapture and reoccupation of our island, and which we've never really recovered from. And of course, immediately after the war, they built up these permanent bases for the region. And next, aside from the missile defense system, they're also doing missile testing, which they plan to start this month. This was something that came up really quick just a few months ago. The military announced that they were going to do these missile testing where they would launch a missile from Guam, either from land or from the water, into the sky, over the ocean between the northern islands and Guåhan. And that a defense missile would then launch from somewhere else. And this debris would just land in the open water over between Guam and the Northern Islands. This is absolutely terrifying to us. There's absolutely no plans to remove or remediate this contamination in the ocean. And this image, this graphic that they've released, is so horrifying to me because the Northern Islands aren't even depicted there. They've done no work to engage the community there, to get them involved in the commenting process that's happening right now. And we're in a very heavy commenting period right now. They've literally given us one commenting period after another this year, from F-15 bed down, from Singapore here, where we're going to anticipate the presence of F-15 fighter jets here, to the missile testing, to the missile defense system, to all kinds of other projects associated with the Marines relocation from Okinawa to Guam. And just to close, just an interesting note as well, that the Consulate General, the Australian Consulate General based out of Honolulu, came to the Marianas just recently, very recently, and plans to come to Guam and the Northern Marianas twice a year. And this is directly associated with the increased militarization of our region. And AUKUS, of course, saying that they're, promoting AUKUS in the region. So there's an official diplomat of Australia based in Honolulu who's now coming here to sell us the idea of AUKUS and how we need it and how it's going to keep us safe here. And so, as we can see, we're all very closely connected. Meanwhile, the threats of nuclear war are growing every single day, and we need to demand diplomacy, disarmament, and genuine security now. And we have to let this gentleman and everybody else know that we know that AUKUS is not a true form of security. It's not to support diplomacy, and that we have to fight it in the Pacific, as well as the expansion of U.S. militarization throughout the Pacific and the world. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with all of you today.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's always so important to hear your latest update. They're always pretty frightening, but they're amazing latest updates. And yeah, we'd love to have those slides to keep in our resources, but also just on the Australian involvement again, the relationship between Australia and America is just, there isn't a cigarette paper between them, is the comparison that our former Prime Minister Paul Keating used. And the Americans come to Australia and look at our land, and there's one famous quote, and I can't say it verbatim, but he expressed joy at the ability to use Australian territory, all this vast areas of unoccupied land, and it's Indigenous land that he's referring to, and it is occupied. And it'll be good to hear from Wayne when he comes on to talk about that. So thanks again. And our next speaker is from Henk Rumbewas. And Henk is originally from Biak in West Papua. We've worked with Henk before to our joy. He is standing for human rights and self-determination issues for West Papua, but he is currently working as a language interpreter and custodial officer in Darwin, where he lives as a refugee from West Papua. And he's also a member of the Uniting Church in Darwin. Thank you, Henk. Over to you.
Thank you, Lynette, and also Justin, who is for the second or third time giving the opportunity for the people of West Papua to participate on this Pacific Peace Network. We have a very interesting history with the appointment of our new president at the moment. Thank you for the early speakers from Korea, Japan, Guam, and the Philippines. Talking about the Philippines or Pacific War, Biak Island was known as the dynamo of the Pacific during the Second War. The Americans murdered 14,000 Japanese in our island, and I lost some member of the families, my uncle, during the war. They become a very strong family story, and I was lucky. I went to visit Hiroshima last year, and also Guåhan. So at least I could connect how the very famous, what you call I shall return, what's his name? The famous American leader at the time. And the frog jumping from the Philippines, Guam, down to Biak Islands. We have the huge American base there. Now, the history of West Papua to be part of Indonesia is the direct involvement of the United States. There is a very, very famous American saying, or English saying, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. These are the facts of history. Because we were formerly Dutch colony, then West Papua transfer, Indonesia claimed that we were automatically Indonesians. The island of New Guinea is the biggest island in the world, second after Greenland, and very rich of natural resources. The Dutch map very well the natural resources, and we have the biggest gold mine in the world at the moment. It used to be South Africa, but now it is West Papua and run by the Americans. Now, during the so-called Cold War, America lost Cuba. And President Kennedy was worried because at the time they got the support from Russians. So President Sukarno, the first president of Indonesia, was a very interesting leader at the time, was looking at Russia to support us, to support Indonesia. And so President Kennedy made a statement, they would better lost a few cannibals on the island of New Guinea. So West Papua at the time was prepared by the Dutch to get the independence, which is in 1961. But then Sukarno sent what you call them paratroops to invade West Papua under the support of the Russians. That was attracting the interest of America, Australia, of course, and New Zealand. So we were transferred to be part of Indonesia without the involvement of a single Papuans. In 1960, America, Indonesia, and the Dutch has an agreement called the New York Agreement in New York, and we were transferred like a few animals to be in the zoo of what we know as the government of Indonesia today. So in 1963, Indonesian military troops who invaded West Papua remained there, and in order to satisfy the international community, the Dutch and the rest of the world had a voting that what they call the free act of choice. But during the occupation from 63 to 69, the Indonesian military just voted few hundreds, 1,025 West Papuans to vote to remain as part of Indonesia. Now, just last October, we had a new president, but this president was very well trained by Americans, military, what you call the elites, the Kopassus, a general, a former son-in-law of Suharto, who invaded West Papua at the time. Like, thank you for the speaker from the Philippines mentioned that Marcos, these are all the puppets of the United States, so including Marcos, Suharto, and now we have this military, very well-trained general, which is Prabowo Subianto, just last October. Now, during his appointment, he has invited a number of Pacific leaders, including Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands. This is interesting because he was requesting Papua New Guinea if they could train Papua New Guinea military personnel and also offer scholarship for the Papua New Guinean students. What we could see here, Indonesian government since took control of West Papua, we have lost more than 3,000 West Papuans. In fact, the ongoing military operation is building up, and this president just recently had what they call the so-called transmigration program, where they send poor Indonesian migrants to settle in West Papua. And we are already, since 1963, we become a minority already from 40%, from 60 to 40. So 60% of Indonesians now, we become minority. And human rights records of this president is not good. He was a war criminal. He was involved on the invasion of East Timor, and he was also involved on the student demonstration in Jakarta in 1998, where there were 13 students disappear until today. So recently, it became a topic of conversation. But because of the nationalism of Indonesia, they appointed him. And this is going to be a very interesting topic of discussion of the leaders at the moment. We have a war criminal leader in Indonesia, a former war criminal. Whether he's still, it's up to the people to decide. And America and Australia recognize it. The building up of military in Darwin is quite a serious matter, and the training of Indonesian forces is going very actively lately, and we hope that the leaders in the Pacific, especially in the Melanesian states such as Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, Fiji, should consider that West Papua, since becoming part of Indonesia, it is now the right of the people in the Pacific to call for Indonesia to consider the human rights abuses since Indonesia took control of West Papua. I don't know what's going on in the near future, but Australia seems to disregard, let's say, a very simple fact. Yes, vote lately in Australia. Everyone was scared if the indigenous of Australia, the Aboriginals, could have a symbolic seat on the parliament. Now, at the moment, we see what's going on in New Zealand, Waitangi Congress. The small minority in the party try to ignore what happened with the Waitangi Congress. It seems like the Pacific leaders also disregard what's going on in West Papua by slowly taking the support from Indonesian government and ignore the human rights plight in West Papua. So this is not a good future for us in the Pacific region. I'm sorry I didn't give you any detailed maps, but thank you for having West Papua in this discussion today.
Thank you so much, Henk, and it's absolutely essential to include West Papua. The parallels between what's happening in Palestine and West Papua are, to me, very clear, and Australia's got a very important part to play in seeing the violence and the lost opportunities for self-determination in West Papua. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on now to our next speaker is Anne Pakoa. Anne is a Vanuatu human rights defender. Her history includes as Secretary of the Vanuatu Human Rights Coalition. She is both Vice Chair of the African Caribbean Pacific Non-State Actors Network Steering Group, as well as part of the Civil Society Forum. A very big welcome to you, Anne.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you also for this opportunity to be able to be part of this very important event. The Pacific is a beautiful region, and I believe that those of us that are listening here today cannot deny the fact that the Pacific is a beautiful, beautiful region. Vanuatu, for example, we're being rated 3 times the happiest place on earth. So we're very proud of our dignity. We're proud of our integrity as a nation. And as a region, we're proud of who we are. We're proud of our culture. We're proud of our values. Just recently, our Pacific leaders launched the 2030 Blue Pacific Strategy. And its vision is that for all Pacific to be resilient, the Pacific region aim at peace, having peace and harmony, security, social inclusion, prosperity that ensures all Pacific people can lead free, healthy, and protective lives. Now, just listening to the earlier presenters is quite frightening. We're hearing about AUKUS and the strategy, the 2 pillars that the AUKUS group is working on, which is showing that our region is under threat. The lives underwater and our green environment is under threat. The Pacific region is still yet recovering from World War II, the Japanese War. And none of our 13 states of the Pacific Island countries have been compensated for the lives that were lost, the lives that were destroyed, the humiliation and the torture that the war had impacted us. Until today, we still have people, just normal people, are still finding the remains of the World War II. So now we're talking about the future war that is already incorporated into the AUKUS strategy. From us in the Pacific region, just like our other Asian Pacific countries or the Asian countries, our women are focusing and trying to be part of the Sustainable Development Goals, encompassing around SDG 16, SDG 13, SDG 7, SDG 1, SDG 2, 4. So the SDGs are here as a global direction for us to fight for change, to fight what is for us, to fight for our dignity, fight for our integrity, but to make sure that development starts from within and that no one should be left out, despite whatever circumstances. So the Pacific Island nations too, including Vanuatu, my country where I live, we have a no one left behind policy. But now that we're talking about the war, it's an elephant, it's an animal that's coming towards us, it's evil. So for us as a peaceful nation, and for us as a peaceful region, where we sleep with no locks on our doors, we can even sleep under the sky, the blue sky, and we can leave our doors open. We don't lock our doors for most of the societies that we come in, that we live in. So now we're talking about this war, something that our political leaders are talking about. Of course it's harmful. Of course it's a threat to our lives, the lives of humans, or the lives of our environment, the lives of a green environment, the lives in the water. So thank you so much for those that are, our earlier presenters. You've actually projected what is happening, what has happened, and what is yet to come, the expectations. As a woman of the Pacific region and a human rights defender, I find that our voices are not strong enough. We have activists and defenders here and there, but what I really want to see now is that we really need to build those strong solidarities, because we're talking about something that will come back and hit us big time. We're talking about something that will come and affect our development. So already climate change is an elephant in its own. We're seeing a lot of impacts on our vegetations, our green economy and our blue economy. And it's affecting everyone. It's affecting the societies. It's affecting the behaviors too. So now that we're talking about the strong political governments that will come in and will rule the Indo-Pacific region with those war tools. Now, what I want to see as a defender is that for all of us to start protecting our values, we start protecting our systems that are in place. So, in simple terms, my question is, where are our community leaders? Where are our chiefs in this conversation? So for us sitting here today, representing the voices of women, representing the voices of our traditional leaders, we want to call on the Americas, we want to call on Australia, we want to call on the UK, that you need to respect the voices of our people. You need to respect us as island nations. The protection of our heritage, the protection of our tradition, the protection of our customs, the protection of our land, the protection of our resources entirely depends on the choices that you make. We are recognized as a region. Our diversity and our heritage are our treasure. We embrace good governance. The observation of democratic principles are our values. we want to ensure that there's peaceful, safe, and stable communities in our Pacific region. And we want to make sure that our security, the security and the well-being of our people are advanced. And while we want to look at different innovations and creativity to improve, to improve the lives of our people, and especially the livelihoods of women, we're strongly asking AUKUS to please work with our
Looks like we might have just lost Anne. I know her internet is quite variable, but a big thank you to Anne for projecting really just what we're all on about. We want to live in that beautiful place where people can leave their doors open, where we don't have to worry about another war starting. We want to think about a future that we create that is worthwhile for our future generations. So I think that was a really valuable, for me at least, projection that Anne has provided. Okay, we're going to move on to our next speaker. For the moment, we've lost Wharton, the Brisbane-based Aboriginal activist, hoping that he will be able to get back on. But we'll move on to our second last speaker, Anne Wright. Anne is always a welcome contributor to webinars. She is so knowledgeable. Anne was in the US Army Reserves for 29 years. She retired as a colonel. She also was a US diplomat for 16 years and served in embassies around the world. She resigned from the US government in opposition to the US war in Iraq. And from that point on, she has been the most amazing anti-war activist and contributes so much to our efforts for a secure future. Over to you, Anne.
Well, thank you, Annette, and thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. I don't know really where to begin. I mean, as a representative of the United States and what we're doing to the world, first, my apologies. And secondly, maybe we can do better, but I don't know. The political environment that we have here in the United States is a great challenge, as you all know. I'm in Houston, Texas right now, but my residence is in the occupied lands of Hawaii, and aloha to you all from Hawaii, which is one of the most militarized areas of the world. And that military force, that U.S. military force, projects onto your countries. And my apologies for that. It's not only a military projection, which we've heard much about tonight, and the increase in new military bases that the U.S. is constructing all over the Western Pacific. It's not only the military projection, it's also diplomatic projection. The Biden administration suddenly realized that the People's Republic of China was actually doing a lot of work in the Pacific. So very quickly in the last 3 years, the United States has created new embassies in 3 island nations, the Solomon Islands, Tonga, and Vanuatu. The U.S. has hosted the Pacific Island summits twice under Biden's administration. To counter some of that, on the cultural side, we have had some things that the people of the region have done, and one of them is the Festival of the Pacific that was held in Honolulu this last summer. And I know every island country of the Pacific was represented with large numbers of people, and I think that was a great time for us to all get together to talk about how we counter all of this militarism that's going on. Just in case you haven't heard, we are going to have a new president in the United States, and that could take probably the next 3 hours for us to discuss what may happen with that. We certainly know that Trump ran on platform saying he was going to be the peace president. Well, we certainly hope he is, because the dangers that we see from the increases in military war maneuvers of the U.S., of the U.S. allies, of China, of Russia, of North Korea, all in the Western Pacific, is something that we should be very, very wary of. And I can only hope that the new president of the United States will be good to his word, that he will try to lessen the tensions. However, even before he has become president, he's kind of ratcheted up some of the tensions by just a unilateral statement saying we're going to put 25% tariffs on China, on Mexico, on Canada, and who knows what else he's going to be saying even before he becomes president. The one thing I can hope for is that he did reach out for a while to Kim Jong-un, and we certainly, in the United States, we need to make sure that this next administration reaches out, and not in a military way, toward all the countries of the region. It's going to be a very challenging time for all of us in the Pacific. And I think that with all of the information that each one of our speakers has given us about what's going on in their nation, that it gives us a lot of information that we can use to mobilize our fellow citizens to say we don't want more of this increased militarization, that we want to have truly peace in the Pacific. I'll mention one book that I've just been reading, and it's called Nuclear War. And I tell you what, it is a very interesting book. It goes minute by minute by minute by minute. If there is ever any country, just one country, that sends one missile toward another country that has nuclear weapons, it is a book that will scare the fire out of you and give us even more reason to push hard to try to end this nuclear threat that we have over all of us that could exterminate us for sure. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to say apologies from the U.S. again, and we will be working with the new administration to try to lessen the dangers that the U.S. is causing in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. And yeah, raising the spectre of nuclear war, which we haven't up until this moment at this webinar, but in fact it is the vastly dangerous, big black cloud that hangs around this prospect of a major powers war, whether it's in the region or whether it is in Europe, with what's happening in Ukraine and Europe. So thanks again. We're going to move on now to Murray Horton. Murray has been a political activist since 1969. What an innings. Since 1991, he has been organizer for the Anti-Bases campaign and campaign against foreign control of Aotearoa. Thank you, Murray. Over to you.
You'll need to unmute, Mary.
Okay, I've unmuted, right? Unmuted, you hear me now?
Yes, we do, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody from Aotearoa, New Zealand. My name is Murray Horton. I'd like to say particular greetings to old friends in Australia. I've taken part in protests at the big American bases at both Northwest Cape and Pine Gap in the past, and a big shout out to the Kasama in the Philippines. I've taken part in protests at the gigantic American bases at Subic Bay and Clark Air Force Base, and also had the pleasure of standing outside the Senate in 1991 when it voted to not renew the treaty for the bases in the Philippines. Our Philippine friend mentioned before the Marcos dictatorship of 50 years ago. I'm married to a Filipina. One of her aunties was the most high-profile female murder victim of that Marcos dictatorship, and her name is on the Heroes Monument and EDSA Memorial in Manila. Okay, let's get on to AUKUS. From a New Zealand perspective, AUKUS is an Australian thing. Why? because since 1987, by law, New Zealand has been nuclear free. So New Zealand was definitely not invited to join AUKUS, and would never be invited to join AUKUS, because the New Zealand nuclear free law prohibits not only nuclear armed vessels, but also nuclear powered vessels from coming into New Zealand waters. And that has been the status quo since 1987. To put it in American terms, it has become a bipartisan sacred cow, rather like your Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, i.e. it is supported by all political parties right across the spectrum. There have been attempts to get rid of it, but it remains the law. And so this led to New Zealand being expelled from ANZUS, the Australia-New Zealand-United States Treaty that had been in force since 1951. Australia and the US are still members, but New Zealand has been kicked out of ANZUS since the 1980s. This doesn't mean that New Zealand is no longer involved with the United States, far from it. The US military has found ways to work around this minor irritation. And so, for example, there are still American facilities in New Zealand. I live in the city of Christchurch. Christchurch Airport, since 1955, has hosted a US military transport and logistics base until, for the benefit of our Australian friends, until quite recently it played a key link in servicing the Pine Gap spy base in Alice Springs. The planes used to fly through here every Sunday. They don't do now. We still have an American base at Christchurch Airport. It's not a combat base. It's exempt. It's specifically exempted from the nuclear-free law. They could fly if they want to do nuclear weapons through Christchurch Airport and not have to tell the New Zealand government. New Zealand, most recently, we have gone down the path of having a privatized military American base built in this country by a company called Rocket Lab that started off as a New Zealand company and is now an American company and has been partnered with some of the biggest arms manufacturers in the world, like Lockheed Martin. So New Zealand is now, believe it or not, a major player in the global aerospace industry. Rocket Lab comes just behind Elon Musk's SpaceX in terms of the numbers of rockets launched for the US military and US intelligence agencies. They're launched initially from the launch pad at Mahia Peninsula in the North Island, and also from Wallops Island, Virginia, in the United States. And the man who founded Rocket Lab, Peter Beck, Sir Peter Beck, has just become New Zealand's first aerospace billionaire. So they're right in the thick of things. And the most important role that New Zealand plays as an American ally is that we are very much the most junior, but still in it, the Five Eyes spy network between the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So since the 1950s, New Zealand has been a member of the Western world's premier spy alliance, Five Eyes, and therefore there is a spy base in the island that I live, the South Island, a spy base called Waihopai, and this has been in existence since the 1980s, and this is New Zealand's key contribution to the American alliance. And it was revealed it was initially set up to spy on countries like New Vanuatu, etc. Our role is to spy on the Southwest Pacific on behalf of American intelligence, all right, on behalf of the US National Security Agency. This year, 2024, it was revealed that Waihopai had been operating without any input from the New Zealand government, without any knowledge of the New Zealand government, for 10 years in the last decade. Waihopai had been operating a program on behalf of the US National Security Agency that was using a detect and kill facility in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. That they had installed a program that could detect people on sort of internet cafes and that track them down and kill them with things like drone strikes. That was all actually run out of this country without any input from the New Zealand government. So Waihopai and Five Eyes is New Zealand's biggest contribution to the American military alliance. In terms of AUKUS, New Zealand, we have politicians that want to get involved in a thing called AUKUS Pillar 2. The submarines, the hypothetical submarines, are Pillar 1. Pillar 2 is a rather undefined, vague thing that apparently would involve advanced military technology, hypersonic missiles, AI, all that sort of stuff. That's the hook that is being dangled for New Zealand to get involved in that. And we have a government at the moment, came into power a year ago, that is interested in getting involved in that. We have senior ministers who are interested in getting involved in that. AUKUS, the reaction towards AUKUS in this country is certainly not as gung-ho as in Australia. We actually have a spectrum of former prime ministers from rival parties and leaders of rival parties who've all come out against AUKUS very explicitly, saying things like, why on earth would we want to get involved in AUKUS? This is from leaders of the most right-wing parties in the New Zealand political spectrum. And that because, for example, China is New Zealand's biggest trading partner. To put this into context, New Zealand has a free trade agreement with China. The United States refuses to give a free trade agreement to New Zealand. So we have a free trade agreement with China. We have no arguments with China whatsoever. There is a push. AUKUS is a push towards war with China to initially contain and then start fighting a war with China. New Zealand was involved with things like, at the moment, in the last few months, New Zealand Navy ships, it was mentioned by one of the speakers, have taken part in a provocative sail through the Straits of Taiwan to sort of annoy the Chinese, to say that we support Taiwan, we support the United States policy on Taiwan. New Zealand in the last few years has got back involved in RIMPAC, the Rim of the Pacific naval exercises off Hawaii that are held every year. It's the world's biggest naval exercise. New Zealand, Israel took part in RIMPAC this year, the Israeli Navy. So about 24 nations took part. So New Zealand's involved in that. And in case you're wondering that this is something that's happened with the new government in New Zealand that came into office in late 2023, no, this stuff started under the previous Jacinda Ardern Labour government. So those of you who might have some rosy view of Jacinda, she was approvingly described by a right-wing journalist in New Zealand when she was Prime Minister as being the most pro-American Prime Minister in New Zealand for the last 50 years, going back to a government that went out of its way to invite American warships to come to New Zealand in the 1970s. Jacinda Ardern was the first ever New Zealand Prime Minister to go and speak at a NATO summit in 2022. NATO. In 2023, her successor as New Zealand Labour Prime Minister, Crop Hipkins, became the second New Zealand Prime Minister to go and speak at a NATO summit in Europe. NATO is expanding into the Pacific, all right? So a hell of a long way from the Pacific, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. By definition, New Zealand cannot be a member of NATO, but we are a partner. We are a partner, Japanese speaker mentioned before. New Zealand belongs to a thing called IP4, Indo-Pacific 4, Australia, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, IP4, NATO partners. And so NATO has told New Zealand to stop doing things like promoting the International Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. New Zealand has been told by NATO that's definitely counterproductive. Don't do that. Get under the nuclear umbrella of NATO. Stop all this nuclear-free nonsense. New Zealand has been told by NATO we need to expand our military spending to 2% of gross domestic product, which is the NATO target and which is also the Trump target. So we're getting this pressure shoved onto us by someone on the other side of the world, NATO, that is moving in. And NATO has now added China to its list of enemies. NATO is expanding that it wants to be the world's policeman. And with Trump operating a isolationist foreign policy in the United States from January the 21st, NATO will take over an increasingly powerful role. And so they are expanding to not only confronting Russia and Ukraine and right across that border in Europe, in Eastern Europe, but also into the Pacific, the Indo-Pacific. And New Zealand is getting sucked into part of that. It's not entirely flippant to say, however, that the biggest threat that the New Zealand military poses to anybody in the Pacific is to the New Zealand military's own personnel. It's only last month, October, that the New Zealand Navy somehow managed to crash and sink a $100 million ship in the New Zealand Navy in Samoa, leaving an environmental mess in Samoa. And the report just came out yesterday saying it was a result of human error. The crew did not know the autopilot was on and couldn't stop the ship. And so we've only got 5 ships in the Navy, and one of them's in the bottom of the sea off Samoa now. So this is all very embarrassing. It's worth mentioning before I finish that there are other threats to peace in the Pacific that do not directly involve the United States military, but they're worth mentioning because they're threats to peace in this part of the world. We touched on it when I was talking with Liz before. The New Zealand government, the one that we have now, has basically launched an all-on assault onto the indigenous Maori people of this country. They're trying to roll back all the gains that have been made in recent history. And the thing that's brought a big fight on is they brought one of the coalition partners has brought out a thing called the Treaty Principles Bill that wants to basically emasculate the New Zealand Foundational Treaty of Waitangi, 1840, that established a partnership between whites and Maori. And we have a very reactionary former Prime Minister in this country who very recently said this bill could lead to civil war in New Zealand. Doubtless hyperbole, but that's very interesting to give the idea of the feelings. And Liz was one of the people who less than 2 weeks ago, one of the 42,000 people who were in the streets of Wellington, New Zealand's capital, surrounding the Parliament on this bill. So this is fighting talk. This is actually the threat of literal civil war on race lines in New Zealand would be a major destabilising factor in the Pacific. There's other things. Deportation policies, right? You might not know what I'm talking about. New Zealand society has been destabilised by the Australian government deporting back, quote unquote, New Zealand criminals. So we've had an upsurge of crime in this country and a growth of gangs, etc., by organised criminals who happen to be born in this country but grew up in Australia, shipped back. This is happening all around the Pacific, and most noticeably in very small island countries. The US dumps out criminals and people it doesn't like back to where they're nominally born. So they send a whole lot of Tongan gangsters from California back to Tonga 20 years ago. And those guys were a major factor in full-on riots that burnt down Chinatown in the capital of Nuku'alofa, in the capital of Tonga in 2006. They had to declare a military emergency. And this is happening all around the Pacific. People are being dumped back into countries, causing major problems. We have in the Pacific another nuclear power that nobody's mentioned here today that is still an old school empire, namely France. We have French nuclear power in the Pacific. They used to test nuclear weapons in the Pacific. The biggest colony, the French biggest colony in the Pacific is called Kaniki, or New Caledonia, which is not far from New Zealand, between New Zealand and Australia. Kaniki had a major uprising this year, 2024, where people were killed. And that where the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, felt sufficiently threatened that he broke off from being in the middle of the French election campaign to fly to the other side of the world for one day to try to sort it out in person and then fly back to Paris.
Thanks, Wayne.
France is still,
Thanks,
France is still
Murray.
an imperial power in the Pacific and is still destabilizing, and they have no intentions of getting out of the Pacific. There's no decolonisation.
That's very important information, Murray. And
I'll just finish by saying that there finally, the other destabilising factor in the Pacific is the disproportionate role of transnational corporations, specifically extractive mining ones. One of the major issues in Kaniki is massive nickel smelters that the French own. You have in West Papua, you have the gold and copper mine of Freeport-McMoRan, which is the main reason that Indonesia wants to hang on to West Papua. And in Papua New Guinea, you have what used to be the Bougainville copper mine that led to a 10-year independence war and civil war. And so all those factors are destabilising for the Pacific. And before I finish, Bougainville is worth mentioning because the New Zealand military actually played a noble role in Bougainville. They went in unarmed. The Bougainvillians did not want Australians because of Australia's record. And so the New Zealand military went in without guns and brokered a peace between the Papua New Guinea government.
Murray, that's a really good point to finish on. Thank you very much for everything you've shared.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, we are missing our last speaker, which was an Indigenous man from Brisbane in Australia, Wayne Wharton.
Wayne is here now.
Oh, Wayne, are you on? Okay, over to you, Wayne. And we have run over time quite significantly. Just to let you know that for anyone who wants to stay on after Wayne finishes his talk, we'd love to continue this for another half hour if people have the stamina to stay on and share ideas and thoughts. Okay, Wayne, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Where are
Can
you,
you
Wayne?
unmute Wayne?
Yeah, unmute. That's it. I've got it now, I think.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we
Is
can
that
hear
right?
you. We can't see you, Wayne.
Can't see you, we can hear you.
Now the seeing part, that's the hard part. Where are we? I don't know about the camera. Where are we? The Zoom. Sorry.
Okay, we're happy to
I
listen
don't
to you.
think
And
it's really the vision. I'm sorry about the vision. That's something I'll work on at the moment. But the most important part there, I may come in now. The most important part, I'm wearing a t-shirt today. I just came back from Canberra on my way back, and it's called the Tides Rising. So it was a large climate change protest that they held in Canberra. But before I go into anything, I'm not. If people want to know about me, you can Google me, or you can see the CIA, or you can see ACO here, and they'll have enough information on me to let you know what I do. But I do pay my respects to the people in the First Nations people in Hawaii that are fighting for their independence, the people in Kanaki in New Caledonia, and I'm glad the gentleman before me mentioned them. It's the silent war that's taken place in the Pacific that no one, including the ABC or Rupert Murdoch or anybody else that wants to report on justice. So just giving you an update on the Kanaki situation. There's something like 2,500 people arrested, 500 people missing, 40 young people that have been murdered by the French forces of 7,000 troops. There are the Australian government through ABC TV and the French television have signed a unilateral agreement on reporting on the incident, and there's no news that's coming out whatsoever. As I said, 40 have been deported to France and are still in jail in France. The UN you can go to the UN news services and have a look at a couple of drops on there to get some recent updates. But they're still under martial law. There's still no schools for the First Nations people, no medical assistance. The racism and the apartheid behaviour is filtered down into business and municipality services and emergency services. So there's a real apartheid backed up by 7,000 troops. So have a look at it. But the thing that I'm most interested in and that I particularly want to get people's information is the West Papuan situation as well. The movement of citizens, Indonesian citizens into West Papua is happening at the moment. They've scheduled something like the relocation of 100,000 loyalists to the Indonesian government to be relocated to West Papua. The whole rubbish that happened in New Caledonia was about relocating and assigning 45,000 extra votes to French citizens to vote in the domestic elections in New Caledonia, in Kanaki. We're seeing a move within the colonies of the Pacific where certain colonial forces are actually stacking the debate with populations and stacking the debate with service agreements, I guess, that are going on. I represent a new newspaper that's going to be launched in the next 2 months. I'm actually very closely tied with the customary law processes that are being re-established throughout the Pacific within the Kanaki, Vanuatu, West Papua, so the Fiji, and that sort of dialogue at a customary law level is being played out. Right now in Australia, we have over 300 sovereign nations. Some of those are about to choose to exercise their sovereignty by applying to the UN for a nation status. The lack of information forced us to set up a newspaper and a media company called Rata. Rata is an Anouan word. It means smoke. It's an independent. It's an NGO. We actually currently have one journalist that's operating out of New Caledonia and about to go into other parts of the country. And as you can appreciate, many of the countries are hostile countries, politically hostile, particularly close. Some countries that are close to home. The mining, the deep sea mining, and the climate change is a major interest to us. One of the things that is a prison for some of the people within the Vanuatu and Kanaki is the French language, and being able to communicate, be able to get the stuff back to various people. But as the 2 or 3 years that the locals have been working on rebuilding the ark, the traditional governance, and the remainder of the empowerment of the customary laws and the customary governances that exist within the Pacific is about 3 years into it. I guess the sovereign nations of Australia have actually taken our part in it this year. And it's something that people that are servicing the area, people that want to basically have treaties, have arrangements, to have dealings, particularly in the environment, particularly in the climate change, and more directly, as the last gentleman decided, there was a nuclear existence in the Pacific. We believe that there's a deal between Australia and the French about the AUKUS being based in New Caledonia. We believe that what they call the Pacific Blue, which is the policing of the Pacific, which is the last gentleman actually touched shallow on, is that the Australian government has supplied $550 million to assist in policing. I don't know how that's going to affect the French colonies, but in English speaking, in the Chogam meeting last month, where the King, Prince Charles, actually went there, and their major announcement was the policing. Rambuka's attitude towards this is not worth a piece of shit. He's actually come out and he's advised the French nationals in Kanaki to don't bite the hand that feeds them, so that how British and how very colonial his survival depends on the deals that the Fijian government make with the French and the other colonizers that want to station their colonies down there, whether it's China, whether it's France, whether it's the US. The return to customary law is something that, and customary representation is something that, people within the Indigenous sector of Australia, and then noting what has just happened in Australia, amplifies that maybe that's the only way that we get something done towards protecting our homelands and protecting our oceans and protecting our seas from these volatile colonialists that purport nuclear weapons and purport war. Thank you.
That is just another view of what we're challenged with, and also how we can work together to struggle against those sinister forces that have planted themselves in the Pacific. Thank you very much, Wayne, for joining the webinar today.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass over now to Liz in Aotearoa to manage any questions that people have, and we will stay online for those that can that can for the next half hour. And so over to you, Liz. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks very much, Annette, and thanks everybody for those fantastic presentations, all the ideas, all the solidarity, and thanks to all of you here who've given up time on your weekend to join us. I just also want to mention the Whangaroa Declaration that was made in Aotearoa in October this year, with representatives from 10 Pacifica nations. And I put a couple of links in the chats to that. And that's another example of a fantastic solidarity looking at ecological justice and peace in the Pacific area. So if anybody would like to raise their hand and ask a question, I ask you to put up your hand, and we will, if you could just ask a brief question, that would be really good in the time that we've got.
And just to say, the best way to do that is to click the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then click the little raise hand button, and we'll be able to see you and call on you.
Thank you, Greta. Everybody, this is Greta from World Beyond War, who is on the east coast of the United States and is our organising director. Thanks for helping us today, Greta.
Yeah, big thank you. But I guess it would also be good if people had any comments as well as questions. So there's so much material to sift through, wasn't there, from those 9 wonderful speakers? Yeah.
I see Henk has a raised hand. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to thank the speakers about Kanaki, New Caledonia. Thank you for raising that, but I wonder if anybody knows what's going on with the issue of our brothers and sisters in Bougainville, because it's beside we are worried about the AUKUS or the presence of America causing war. Papua New Guinea is heavily involved with the United States at the moment. And I don't know what would the future be in Bougainville with also the fight for independence or whatever status they're going to be. Does anyone know? That's my question.
Is anybody able to answer that question? Or Lee has her hand up and also Man has his hand up as well. But if anybody is able to, I don't know if Anne, if you're able to have some feedback around that yet, but maybe if you could get back to that question. And Lee, do you have a question or a comment? Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that's been here today. I've been studying Andrew Fowler's book, Nuked, and I'm still nuked myself. And I've done a huge timeline, about 80 pages of the corruption involved in that. Don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I've been speaking with Andrew. But I live in Perth, and my family and I are very close to where the Stirling base will be. And I drove through there on the weekend, and you know, it's heartbreaking to me that none of us knew anything about it. You know, that's our family area where we've gone on school holidays and where it's a loved area. Fremantle looks like it's going to hold nuclear waste. So we're actually got a meeting on in Fremantle of the community, which is going to be attended by some stock AUKUS and IPAN. And I want to speak there, but I don't even know where to start, you know. And I just think our mayor's just been over to the US they've gone over to see how wonderfully happily everyone lives in the US around bases, you know, and our mayor is on side with them in Fremantle, I believe. So, you know, what do you do? You know, I feel so lost. I'm so grateful to the women that are on here as well, to you, Henk, you know, to all of the men that are on here. But where do we start? You know, we've got no warning to prepare for this, and it's already happening down there. It's happened, you know. Help.
Thank you, Lee. Well, as you can see from the other people who've been speaking today, there is a lot of people who just carry on and continue to oppose. So
Can I make a comment on that, Liz? I mean, to Lee, she mentioned the book Nuked by Andrew Fowler. I was asked to review that book for an American online magazine called Covert Action, and did a very detailed review of Andrew Fowler's book. And so if you wanted that, Lee, my analysis of the Australian politics involved, and how it all happened. I'd be quite happy to send that to you, but if you supply your email address to Liz, I will send you that review.
Thank you. That would be really,
I actually wonder if there is an international court of law where we can take our politicians to court for what they've done to us. You know, that's where I'm kind of headed.
One point the book made was that it took American newspapers, there was no mention of Australian newspapers, to point out the incredible penetration of the Australian defence and political establishment by actual individual Americans, military personnel, right up to and including defence headquarters in Canberra, to push that stuff through. And where is Scott Morrison now? He's got a job with a political consultancy as of this year that is working with people that lobby American governments for contracts. Along with Mike Pompeo.
I know if you can put, Murray, a link to that that review in the chat, that would be good. So let's come to Man, Alka-Easy in Christchurch, and then we'll come to you, Bevan. Thank you.
Okay. I would like first to thank all the speakers and the organizers for this Zoom meeting, because I learned a lot from countries that experiencing essentially the consequences of getting into these military pacts. But if I conclude what exactly everybody is saying, is that being part of AUKUS will pose a threat, not protection. And that there's really no benefits to our people or countries. The question is, what can we do? Because, I mean, I listened to, of course, there are many people who are talking about this subject, but is the action that we have to take, because the threat is huge. And it has to, of course, there has to be a reaction to what is happening. To start with, I was thinking that a lot of the information that I learned today are not public enough. We definitely need all the social media, all the YouTube, all the TikTok, whatever means that we have to let the public know about all these military pacts and their influence on the society, on the economy, on the environment, and on humanity in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Man. Thank you for that. And it was a great response. And of course, the other thing that everybody can do is just to keep being involved in our organizations that are doing this work, and, you know, keep showing up, keep asking the questions, coming along to the webinars and so on. There is another question actually about if there is an Israeli base in Vanuatu, in Santos, and I don't know if Anne, if you're still here, if you can answer that question too as well. Perhaps you could let us know. So, Bevan, hello. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the Pacific Peace Network for organising this wonderful webinar. There's been so much we've been able to learn what's happening in other countries, and we do need to publicise this material. I think what Lee Patrick suggested about taking certain politicians and referring to the International Court of Justice has a bit of merit, but I'd like to see the Pacific Peace Network develop a declaration, a call for peace and justice, of representing the peoples of the Pacific, a declaration that what we want to see happen, and the call on governments. Is it possible for us to work together for a people's declaration for peace and justice for the Pacific peoples?
All right, thanks for that suggestion, Bevan. And I've also put a link to the Whangaroa Declaration, which is a Pacifica-based declaration, which is very much along the same lines, working towards peace and justice in the Pacific. Pacific Peace Network also has a declaration, which is that we put together several years ago. John Price, welcome. Please unmute.
Thank you very much. My name is John Price, and I want to raise my hands to all of you here tonight, and particularly to the presenters. For me, it was a fabulous, informative moment. I can't express how appreciative I am. I will express it in just a second in a better way. I'm speaking to you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples, otherwise known by its colonial name as of Vancouver, Canada, part of Turtle Island. And I just want to say that the issues that have been raised are also important to us here. I belong to a project called Canada-China Focus. We have been dealing with the demonization of China, racial profiling of Chinese Canadians, and we've also been very concerned about Canadian frigates in the Pacific provoking and participating in US maneuvers off of Taiwan and off of Korea. I just want to say that our organization does have some resources, and we will be proposing to share those resources with this network in the next little while. So for those of you who are looking for hope and for moving forward, I hope this will be a small addition, and that you know, together we'll be able to do things. There's two other peoples from Vancouver also on the on this call, and we hope to establish a Pacific Peoples Network, Peace Network out of Canada that will be here continuously to support your activities. And I do think that we will be able to do great things in the future. So I thank you for all the work that you've done to bring us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great to have you coming over to us from Vancouver. And there's a lot of solidarity there. So I see that Kai has just put a comment. Kai, would you like to speak to that comment, please? I know you're very involved in what's happening in Jeju, and you might like to say something about working in solidarity.
Well, I don't have anything extra to add about Jeju right now, but I shared the Pacific Peace Network statement from 2021 in the chat. So it's a few years old now, but because there was already a statement from this group before, I shared that for reference in the chat. Thank you to all the speakers today.
I was just, it's Wayne Wharton here, Australia. Just for the gentleman from Bougainville, we have a page that, like I said, we have an active journalist that's operating at the moment out of Australia. And any assistance, any contact that we're made, we will, our journalists and our organisation called Rata Media will follow up out of Brisbane.
Yeah, I think that's a really great development, Wayne, the Rata Media, and we need to talk to you more about connecting with the Pacific Peace Network's Facebook
We're
page.
very worried about how we were the first delegation to go into Kanaki after the killings.
Very important.
I told them that we got 4 people in there, Aboriginal people in there, and out within 4 days before any other delegation went in there and reporting. Our intentions are that through the Rata Media is to be able to get into Bougainville, to get into other, I'm not going to say other places, but you all know the other places, and start setting up correspondence and reporting back out of there so information comes out and the information is verified and the information is shared.
Terrific.
Can I make a comment in response to Man and to Bevan, that saying what can people do about it? I mean, both Australia and New Zealand have elections coming up in the next 2 or 3 years. So there needs to be a push by the peace movement, the campaign on AUKUS, to make this an election issue. Particularly in Australia, elections are not one fought on foreign policy. The last election that foreign policy featured in New Zealand was the 1980s. Elections featured in things like the economy and money. But there's the hook for Australia, because AUKUS is going to cost an astonishing amount of money, 368 billion Australian dollars for a country of slightly less than 27 million people. Is an incredible amount of money. You could build an awful lot of houses, schools and hospitals for that sort of money rather than wasting it on submarines. And that, so there is a push to put it onto the agenda of the Australian election, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is next year, 2025, and New Zealand has one in 2026. To give you an idea of the political consensus in New Zealand, we currently have what's called a National Party government, the equivalent of your Liberals here. They were so happy with the New Zealand Labour Party defence policy that for the 2023 election, National did not bother to issue any defence policy of its own. They simply just took it as read, the Labour Party policy. So that's the sort of bipartisan consensus that we have on defence in this country, including AUKUS at the moment. But make it an election issue in Australia and New Zealand.
Good point.
I doubt it'll be one in
We're
America.
certainly trying to do that, Murray, in with IPAN and the work that
it
we
needs to be the Australian Labor Party activated. God.
Yeah, absolutely.
ALP.
Yeah, I think it's worth. Yeah, I was just going to point out that the at COP, the last COP, $300 billion has been after much fighting has been agreed on to fund transition for and compensation to developing countries for climate change. And here we've got $368 billion being spent on submarines. It's outrageous. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
One of the key points in that book, Nuked, by Andrew Fowler, was the wholesale acceptance by Anthony Albanese and the ALP of Scott Morrison's AUKUS policy. And the Nuked book claims that the Australian Labor Party for the last 50 years has been terrified of a repeat of the 1975 Whitlam coup, in which Pine Gap played a major role, and the US Central Intelligence Agency. So that's a major concluding theme of that book of his, Andrew Fowler, Nuked, that Australian Labor Party has been crippled for 50 years of doing anything remotely independent foreign policy in case the Americans overthrow them again. I was in Australia in 1975. I was there when it happened.
Thank you, Myra. That's a very good point. And I also see that we have David Bradbury here on this. And David is a very experienced award-winning filmmaker who has filmed in all sorts of countries on these topics. And I think, David, that you're over in the United States at the moment. I just wonder if you've got any comments that you'd like to add to our discussion today based on where you're coming from. And if you can unmute, please.
David, can you go ahead? It looks like you're unmuted.
Muted.
It says his mic is unmuted, but we're not hearing you.
Okay, that's a shame. I see that you've made a comment, the technical thing at your end. So you already made a comment.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's coming up to the nearly 4 minutes to the hour, and so perhaps now is a good time just to thank everybody, especially our speakers, for giving your wisdom, sharing your experience, sharing your passion and your hard work and the sweat and tears and knowledge of what's coming and it's what's going on. thank you so much for being with us today and giving us your time and expertise. We really appreciate it. And also thank you to everybody who's come along and to learn about what's going on and to share and to think about ways of making an impact. Thanks so much for coming along today and giving your time on your weekend.
Just a message to David quickly is if he's running, well, what we need in Australia is 76 independents sitting in the upper house.
Okay, thanks for that. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also a big thanks to Greta and to Annette and all the members of the Pacific Peace Network for working together across many time zones to create today's event. It's just it's wonderful to do this work together and to do everything that we can to make a difference. So
thanks, Liz. One last thing, Liz, we are letting people know that we're holding a planning meeting in January to look to the year ahead. It is the 80th anniversary since the first use of nuclear weapons against Japan. It's also the anniversary of the formation of the United Nations and the biennial Talisman Sabre exercise will be held in Australia in July, August. Another huge war exercise, war preparation exercise. So we're hoping in terms of what we can do, we can collectively have a greater impact in alerting our communities about what's going on, but also projecting an alternative. So thanks, Liz, and thanks everybody for coming, and particularly the speakers who came and gave their time.